Jesus' teaching has inspired our world. We may have heard phrases such as, "You are the salt of the earth," "You can't serve both God and money," and "Love your enemy." These words come from a collection of teaching known as the Sermon on the Mount. Now, this sermon is part of 5 teaching blocks in the Gospel of Matthew. It has been specifically crafted to reflect the 5 books of the Torah: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. These are the opening books of the Bible, attributed to Moses, and the foundational books whose wisdom guided the community. So Jesus' 5 teaching blocks parallel the 5 books of the Torah, which can of course be translated as teaching. Now, the tradition states that Moses went up the mountain where he experienced the presence of God, and he came down with the 10 commandments, and all the teaching were recorded in the Torah. So Matthew intentionally depicts Jesus speaking from the mountain in the opening block of teaching, because he is seen as the new Moses, revealing God's wisdom to the people. Now, of course, Matthew wants to say more about Jesus than simply being a new Moses, but here, that is the point. He is this new Moses, revealing God's wisdom to the people. So, let us join the disciples and the crowd that emerged on the mountain with Jesus. And when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him, and he began to teach. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify the Father in heaven. On the mountain with Jesus were the ordinary people of his day. Many of them were struggling because they were living under the oppression of the Roman Empire. So he begins to teach, declaring, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." However, the word heaven literally means skies. So we could say, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of the skies." Jesus was proclaiming a new vision that appears to be beyond our reality. Earth, as we know, is a woven reality of goodness and joy, but also of violence, corruption, and suffering. Yet Jesus speaks of a way where generosity, justice, and peace shall rule. It seems like a world beyond, a vision that we might call pie in the sky. Yet Jesus proclaims a vision that is no longer beyond us, but is coming to us through Jesus. More specifically, it is starting with the poor, coming from a Hebrew word, ani, meaning humble. And so we might say it is coming to those of humble spirit. He goes on to say, "Blessed are the pure in heart." These are the people who see and recognize their dependence on God. They are people who orientate themselves to God rather than their own self-interests. So the arrival of God's kingdom is starting not with the powerful elite, but with the humble, the ordinary, and those who grieve the loss of someone or something that was important. It is a vision that God's presence and blessing is coming from the bottom up and will bring transformation. This is a vision of a community of people who are not corrupted by power, but will serve because they will hunger and thirst for righteousness, right relationships. They will be merciful and seek after peace. Now this radical vision of generosity, of justice and peace ends with a note about persecution. Because the realm of the skies, God's way, this peacemaking revolution, will be in conflict with evil, corruption and power that wishes to oppress. So Jesus goes on to show that this vision of peace that is courageously defined to the experience of persecution stands in the legacy of the prophets. The people had forgotten their heritage. The prophet Micah reminded us that they were a people brought out of slavery to be a salt and light of the earth. They were to be a bottom-up community, dependent upon God, living mercy and justice. They chose to be like earthly nations and persecuted God's messengers. So Jesus, like Moses, is standing on the mountain speaking to the oppressed, calling them to this vision of the skies to be salt and light, to seek after justice and peace. In this season of harvest, we too stand on that mountainside, listening to Jesus' vision. We stand in the legacy of Micah, the other prophets, and those early disciples of Jesus. Will we pick up our cross, being courageous to act justly, love mercy, to walk humbly with our God? Perhaps as we ponder this, we listen for a moment to Benedict, the people of Liberia.
My name is Benedict D. Siki. I'm a Liberian. I work for All We Can in Liberia. It's a country that has two seasons. It rains and it's sunny. We have a green forest, a real green place. With a small population, what makes Liberia so special is that it has a mixed culture. There were indigenous people on the soil, and then the free slaves from America settled in Liberia. And then that culture has been mixed. Our people are friendly, loving people, quick to adapt, quick to get around. That's the beauty of our country. There's a whole lot of challenge in our country as a result of the Civil War. A greater portion of our young people that grew up during that time couldn't have a full education, so we have a high illiterate population. Because of the war, most of the companies, investors had to pull out of our country, so it reduced the number of job opportunities. And even our basic social services are not available because they were destroyed as a result of the war. A bigger portion of our country has no electricity. Most of the homes around here do not have access to pipe-borne water. People live below $1 a day. Our hope and wish for organizations operating in our country around development, we hope that they can engage the actual people to deliver on actually the things that are needed. Our partners are so unique in their approach. When people lead their own development process, they see it as theirs, they take ownership of it, and then they do it with all of the energy, and they are passionate about what they do because they understand the context themselves. My dream for Liberia is a huge one. I know what it means to struggle, and my dream is Liberia should never return to the days when we were young. I want a Liberia where my kids can go to better schools, where my kids can have better life. My kid can get up and turn on the light. My kid can get up and just go to the water tap and have water to drink. Those basic necessities of life, that's the kind of dream I pray, and I wish that we can reach there one day.
Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, till heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest iota, not the least stroke of a pen, will be at any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom. After the vision of the Beatitudes, Jesus teaches about the Torah because people thought he had rejected the teaching given to Moses by God. And while the Torah was foundational for people, like the Pharisees and scribes, they would meditate upon its wisdom so that they could apply the Torah to the new situations that arose in their day. And so one of these clear examples would be about the Sabbath. Torah speaks about observing a day of rest, a day of Sabbath, of not working. But it doesn't really tell us what constitutes as work. So some people would meditate on the Torah to discover its wisdom. But Jesus often disagreed with their interpretations. And so, for instance, the Pharisees would have considered perhaps healing as something of work on the Sabbath and something we shouldn't do. Whereas Jesus' wisdom from interpreting the Torah said no, healing on the Sabbath is absolutely fine. And so we hear that people were unsure and questioning Jesus, and he speaks here on this mountain to say, look, I haven't come to abolish the Torah, but to fulfill it. That from the tiniest letter to all that is written, I come not to abolish, but to fulfill. And so what we then read and discover are different examples that Jesus uses something of this formula. You've heard that it was said in the Torah, but I now tell you. This isn't about abolishing what the Torah said, but like the others, such as the Pharisees and scribes, is building upon the wisdom of the Torah for the day that Jesus lived in, to make sense of it in their world. And so in a moment, what we shall do is listen to those examples. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother and sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, Rakah, is answerable to the courts. And anyone says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them, and come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way. For your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery within her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to stumble, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for the whole body to go to hell. It has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, makes her the victim of adultery. And anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you've heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is the footstool or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great King. Do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this comes from the evil one. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you, take your shirt, hand over your coat as well. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you. Do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbour and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even tax collectors doing that? And if you greet your own, what are you doing more than others? Do not even pagans do that? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. So I said earlier on that we have examples that show how Jesus continued to follow the foundation of the Torah, that he was building upon it just like the Pharisees and scribes did. And so we hear this formula, you've heard it said in the Torah, but now I'm building upon its wisdom, and I tell you to apply it in these ways for these situations. And we have these different examples, and it begins with the first one about murder and anger. And that Jesus says, actually these things are the same. You've heard it said don't murder, but I now tell you murder and anger, they're kind of the same thing. Which we're probably going, no, they're not the same thing. But what Jesus is trying to get here, actually where they come from in our heart, they might be the same thing. It's not to say anger is always wrong. There are different stories in the Bible, stories of Jesus being angry. But quite often our anger comes from the same place as murder. That we come to dishonour, to use our power to dishonour someone else. Whether that is about killing them, or whether that is about inflicting our anger and dehumanising them in the words that we use and speak. Do we use our words and our actions to dishonour others? And of course, this in the story here takes us to adultery. And a similar thing, what lies within our hearts? Do we dishonour others by not seeing the person who stands before us, but do we dishonour them by objectifying them in lustful ways rather than seeing the human being? Do we use our power to dishonour those who stand before us and simply objectify them? Now, the teaching about divorce we might struggle with a little bit more because it has been misused to dishonour women. It has been used at times in our history to shame and entrap women within marriages. But I don't think that was actually the intention of it. It speaks here that a man in this patriarchal society needed a certificate of divorce to separate himself from his wife. But it didn't really say what constituted that divorce. And so there were many different discussions and debates about it, and it was quite easy at times for men to divorce women. That would have left them vulnerable, that would have shamed them in many different ways in that culture. And so what we hear is Jesus coming here saying, making it very difficult for a man to divorce his wife. And it's actually putting upon the man quite often the blame for the end of that relationship. And what I think we find in here is that what Jesus is doing is challenging the power in many ways and saying we need to honour women. And so while we struggle with this really, maybe we'd want to suggest we would want to apply its wisdom for us today is how does our marriages and divorce honour women today? We go from this though to oaths, and we hear a simple thing here Are you people of honesty and integrity? Do you honour people with the words that you speak, or do you dishonour them by trying to trick them? Be people of integrity and honesty. Make your yeses yes, your noes noes, and honour people for who they are. The next one afterwards, we've often interpreted this sense of retribution, that we are to be a doormat, to simply passive doormats. But I don't think actually that's quite what this reading is about. It is about power and honour, but it's almost about saying, you are trying to dishonour me, but I'm going to use my power that pushes back, saying you must honour me. And so it talks here about a slap on the right cheek. Now, a slap on the right cheek was a way you could dishonour someone, dehumanise them, and say that they're lower than you. And so this idea of slapping them on the other cheek is to say, no, if you're going to slap me, you will honour me and treat me as an equal, and slap me on the other side. It's a pushback to somebody using their power to dishonour you, saying, I will use my power to make so you know I am your equal. And it's the same here with this idea of coats. You couldn't take somebody's coat because it was also their blanket, but you could take their shirt. And so it's this sense of trying to dehumanize and dishonor somebody. I'm going to take your shirt off your back. Well, no, you won't. You will honor me. I will use my power to show you your harshness, of how you're trying to shame me, and say, I am your equal. If you want my shirt, take my coat as well. And almost putting a light upon their dark acts. And it's the same thing with, if you want me to go and carry your stuff for 1 mile, I'll carry it for 2. Soldier could use its power to shame you, to dishonor you, to dehumanize you, to force you to carry their burden and their load for a mile, but not 2 miles. I am your equal. I will not allow you to dehumanize and dishonor me. I am your equal. I will therefore walk it for 2 miles, and I will show you actually what you're doing is just wrong. It is a passive way of standing up to those who wish to dehumanize and dishonor us. And then, of course, we end with the reading of love for enemies. People may wish to dishonor us, but we will use our power to not dishonor ourselves, and not to dishonor others, not to dehumanize them. We will show them a different path, the path towards peace. We shall love those who hurt us. And so what I think we have here is teaching that is speaking into power, but also speaking that we need to honour the other person before us in all sorts of different examples and contexts. This is what it is to be the salt of the earth, the light of the world. And this is something, what it is, to bring in this vision of the kingdom of the skies into reality by honouring those. So let's ponder that and consider that in the week ahead and the days ahead, as we think of harvest and as we think of the people of Liberia. How might we honour them?